Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Welcome to episode 13 of Life After the Rams. Today I'm joined by Rory Delap, the Republic of Ireland international who's best remembered for his long throw-ins. Rory reflects on his Derby County journey, his life in the game and the pride of watching his sons Liam and Finn forge their own careers in professional football, carrying on the family's connection to the sport. This episode of Life After the Rams is brought to you in association with Seven Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby and Rams Trust, the Derby County Supporters Society. Established to promote good governance and fan engagement, they welcome new membership applications from all supporters. Just visit ramstrust.org.uk/membership for further details.
Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Rory, good to catch up. You should be back in football with all this talk about long throws in the Premier League, shouldn't you?
Yeah, it seems to have come round again, but I've spoke to a couple of people about it now, and I'm kind of on that one though. What can you do with football? You know, you can change formations, you can change shape, you can change if you play direct or, you know, Pep Guardiola style from the keeper. You can only do so much, and I can remember when I started doing the throwing, people were talking about Dave Chalner and Andy Legg that were probably 5-10 years before my time, and you know, but it wasn't really spoken about till probably I went to Stoke, so that's probably 20-25 years later after Andy Legg and Chalner, and there was Hutchinson at Chelsea before that.
Derby lad, of course.
Vinnie Jones in the Wimbledon era. So, yeah, it just surprised me the amount of teams that are doing it, and the fact that some of those teams haven't got a long throw, which is, you know, you watch them, you see it all set up, and then the throw goes 15 yards. But there's a number of teams, you know, Arsenal, Brentford, Tottenham to a degree, using it really well and to good effect.
I noticed Sean Dyche moaning the other day that the rules are different between the Premier League and the Football League about drying the ball, which you used to have this, didn't you? Where you used to have a towel sewn into your shirt to dry the ball.
I don't know where this came from, but everyone asked me, and it was basically the home team at that time. You either had to provide towels for both teams, or you could say for no teams. So it was the home team's decision. So obviously when we were playing away, the home team was always saying no. So I tried gloves, which I did. I hated wearing gloves, so that wasn't a go. But I basically wore a vest under my shirt that was a little bit more, because the shirts don't withhold water; they just move it around a little bit, whereas the vest seemed to get a little bit of the moisture off the ball, and I could get a little bit of a better grip. But yeah, it was. I don't know where the towel inside my shirt came from, but it's a good story.
It is a good story. Yeah, shame it's not true.
No.
Yours was quite a different long throw, though, wasn't it? Again, you mentioned Ian Hutchinson, and his was probably the first one that everybody who's old enough remembers, because it settled an FA Cup final replay. His long arcing throw, and he used to windmill his arms afterwards, flick on at the near post, and David Webb nodded in at the back post, and Chelsea beat Leeds to win the FA Cup. And that's the first one I certainly remember. But yours was a much different style.
Yeah, well, people say, why didn't I do it at Carlisle, at Derby, Southampton.
I don't remember you doing it at Derby.
And I used it, but it was because we didn't have the biggest team at Derby. We used to practice. I can remember working on it. We had Dion Burton and Dean Sturridge up front, one chop, before he left. And we used to use it along my side. I was playing wing back, obviously, and it was more to try and drag a defender under the ball and then go in behind and get in behind, probably around the halfway line. So I used it in a different way. And then Carlisle, I used it quite a lot because we had a decent size, scored a few goals up there. But the manager wanted a little bit of height on it, so that the defenders, if they got the first touch, didn't get distance on the clearance. And then Southampton was the same, and we'd only use it if it was 0-0 or we were 1-0 down in the last couple of minutes as a last resort kind of thing. And again, Strachan wanted me to throw the ball as high as possible, so that again the defenders couldn't get it clear, and we could pick up. We used it more to pick up the second ball and try and get a shot or the second phase of attack from that. So used it with Ireland. Funnily enough, Robbie Keane scored from one of them. So yeah, I used it through my career. But the biggest thing about the success we had at Stoke was the size of the team there. You know, I'd say pretty much 8 or 9 of the players were well over 6'2", 6'3", and very brave with it, you know. And we worked on it, not religiously, but we worked on set plays in general a lot, because we knew that would be a real source of goals, and it was the way it happened with getting promoted out the Championship and staying in the Premier League. Not just the throw-ins, the free kicks, the corners. You know, if you look back at the catalogue of goals we scored the promotion season and the first 2 seasons in the Premier League, a high percentage of them were from set plays, but it wasn't just lumping it in the box. We used to work really intricate set plays to, you know, a shooting position around the box. We'd try and work a little bounce around the back of the wall, get a cross or a shot in off the back of that, and we scored a couple of goals by teams thinking we were just going to chuck it in the box, but we'd play short. Even the throw-in, we used to line up everybody in the box to take a long throw and go short to try and off-put the opposition. And you know, it worked really well for us in those few years.
Did you do any specific work on your upper body to give you extra strength to be able to throw the ball further? Was it just something you could do naturally?
Yeah, it was something I've been able to do, just throw things, not just footballs, my whole life. You know, I was pretty decent at the javelin growing up, but it wasn't until I came to Derby. Dane Farrell was the fitness coach, and there wasn't a lot of clubs that had dedicated fitness coaches, and Dane was on another level, mentally and job wise. He was a great character to have around, but he was like, well, you've got this, so why not try and improve it? And he used to get me in the gym only, you know, a couple of times a week with, you know, the jelly balls, like the medicine balls, and use different weights and go in the indoor gym at Rainsway and work on the strength, work on flexibility. He reckons it was because I had an over flexible back, and my shoulders were very strong, which is the reason I could do it. And he said size doesn't come into it, so the length of arms, he didn't believe that was. And if you look, there's a girl, Megan Campbell, who plays for Ireland, or played, sorry, she's retired now, and she could pretty much match the distance and velocity of my throws, and I think she's about 5'5", 5'6", so that would go some way to proving that.
Certainly did. As you say, it was really effective for Stoke, and in a way what they're remembered for, but that time and that group of players, I remember Stoke getting promoted and thinking, well, they'll be straight back down the following season. What do I know about football?
Well, we went to Magaluf. Don Matteo booked a trip to Magaluf, and I played for Southampton. We bumped into about 50 Portsmouth fans, and I thought, oh no, keep the head down. And the recognisers came over. We had a bit of good crack, and they were giving us a bit of stick of, we'll beat Derby's record, and then so we started singing back to them, we only want 12 points, and you know, so it was but I think, yeah, it was probably a little bit unfair that we were labelled with the sort of set plays, and that's the only way we could score, because you know, people talk long ball, but it was for a reason. You know, Tony Pulis was so big on data and statistics and stuff, even though you know, there wasn't loads around in that period, and he, I can remember him saying the first day back for pre-season when we were in the Premier League, and he had the stats on the relegated teams, how many goals are conceded and the percentage of goals that they'd conceded by losing the ball in their own half. It was 78% of the goals conceded they lost in their own half. So he said, we'll take that out of the equation, we'll play the game in their half. But we played football in their half. We'd get the ball there quickly and directly, but we had Matty Etherington, Jermaine Pennant, James Beattie, Mama Sidibe, Rick Fuller. All these guys, were very good players, 1v1, and that's we used the strength in the team to score goals. We got a high percentage from set plays, but that was probably more to do with the fact that teams were really struggling with the wingers. 1v1, we'd get a lot of free kicks, a lot of corners in the final third, and a lot of throw-ins in those areas, and it paid off for us.
Certainly did. All right, let's rewind. Though I think you're from Carlisle, you're actually born in the Midlands, Sutton Coldfield.
Yes. Correct.
So how did all the early days come about, born in Sutton Coldfield then?
Yeah, my dad had got a job in Carlisle before I was born, so I think I was 5 or 6 months old when we left the Midlands and went to Carlisle, and then stayed there till Derby took me when I was 21.
Carlisle, just remind us of your playing days at Carlisle.
Yeah, played Sunday League football, local, and then the regions and stuff. Carlisle didn't have an academy. They had a school of excellence, which was a group from 14 years to 16 years that used to only train, I think it was twice a month on a Thursday. And I was released from that at 15, and then the last game of the season as an under-16 player, the youth team coach Dave Wilkes, who sadly passed away now, was down at the game, watched me. I managed to play well, and he invited me in for a trial, which would be the first week of my first year scholar. So I was 15 at the time because of my July birthday, so it was the back end of June. Didn't have anything in terms of, I just wanted to be a footballer, so I'd given up on school to train. Missed a couple of exams stupidly, but in those days it was football or education that didn't work together like they do today. And came in, did well, got a 2-year scholar, and ended up making my debut at the end of that year as a 16-year-old. Didn't play the next year. Michael Knighton took the club over, invested, and they brought a lot of good players in. Got promoted, got to Wembley, but it wasn't until the following year when they were in, it was the old 3rd division, which is now League One. I managed to get in and get into the team, into the starting 11, and from there I think I played just over 80 games. Had a trial at Derby. Luckily impressed the gaffer, and about 2 months later he signed me up, and that was that.
We'll come to talk about that more in a minute. So when Liam and Finn are starting to show that they're not just going to be kids who can just kick a ball around, they're probably going to follow in their dad's footsteps. Were you receptive to that, or were you more, well, you're not going to be missing exams like I did, you're going to do what you need to do first, and if football follows on, so be it?
Yeah, it was pretty much the way it went. Obviously receptive to them. They were always going to like football. They were at football every weekend watching me when they were younger, and you'd like them, even if it was just to be able to go and watch games with them. That's all I was bothered about. But to be fair, both of them showed, the hand-eye coordination at a young age. And then when Derby offered Liam to come into the academy, I was against it.
You were against it?
Yeah, because he was 8 years old, and I thought, I didn't know much. I'll be honest, I didn't know much about academies at that stage. I was still playing, but I thought, no, just go and play with your mates. He was at Duffield Dynamos at the time. I thought, just go and play with your mates, use it as a social if something happens a little bit later on. But he got upset. He wanted to go. down and have a look. So I said, okay, no problem. But school will take priority, and you will do other. I don't want you just playing football for the next 2, 3, 4, whatever so you've got to do other sports, you've got to do other things, but I said, if you ever don't play with a smile on your face or you're not enjoying it, like I'll make the decision and pull you out. But to be fair to him, he never wanted to miss a training session. I'll be honest, Derby were brilliant with him. Josh Butler, who worked there for a long time, who you'll know was excellent with the young kids at that period. And he used to go, and then Finn kind of followed the same path a couple of years later, and I had the same conversation with him. He's a little bit more laid back than Liam, so it was a bit different route with him, if I'd say, and that went through from that age to pretty much now. And they just carried on, and it was difficult because you could see Liam was kind of the top end of the groups. Finn was always sort of around the middle, and I spoke to the coaches at Derby since. He probably, looking back, he maybe should have been released a couple of years before he was, because he was released as an under-16, and then you're sort of not scrabbling, but it's tough sometimes because a lot of clubs have made the decision. But to be fair, Derby made the decision before Christmas, so we got a little bit of a heads up on most other lads that were released. And I thought it'd be an interesting time for Finn, because it's tough going that trials route, and but he was brilliant in that period. He stuck at it, carried on training at Derby to keep his fitness up, and then got a couple of offers off the back of it, and ended up at Burton. So it's lovely to see them follow it, but it's not been plain sailing or stress free, I've got to say.
Yeah. So if Liam goes in at 8 years of age, we know how many go through the academy system and eventually come out the other end with a professional contract and a professional career. So again, that I presume was in the back of your mind all the time, that you're not going to do like I did and miss exams and so on. You are going to take this seriously. Listen, the things had changed massively in that period for me coming through. The clubs used to fight the schools, and it'd end up usually affecting the kid, whereas it completely flipped with the way things are run now. The schools and the clubs work brilliantly together and provide education on both sides. The schools, as long as the kids behave and they don't fall behind with the schoolwork, which is it's the most important thing, that there's a backup. Not if they don't make it at 16 or 18 or 22 or 32. So there's something behind that player, that kid, whatever age they are, when they come out of the academy or professional football. They've got something to back it up. It was never in my mind that they were going to become footballers until, with Liam, it was probably 13, 14, you saw he had a chance. With Finn, probably a little bit longer in terms of getting to that period when he was released, and then at 16, so it was a tough one because he was doing his GCSEs at the time as well. So, but he managed to handle both pretty well. All right, we'll talk more about the two of them again in a little while. So back to a young Rory Delap swapping Carlisle for Derby. This is Premier League Derby as well, managed by Jim Smith, and have made a mark for themselves in the Premier League. So that was a big step up for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, my only concern was that I wasn't coming in as a development player. I was starting every week for Carlisle. I had done for nearly 2.5 seasons.
So you were more keen to be playing than necessarily keeping the bench warm?
Yeah, there was a couple other clubs that had inquired or put bids in. I think Burnley was one. And they'd sort of said, look, he's coming in to start. But I was just on it. I spoke to Jim Smith. I said, look, don't need to know the financials, don't need to know anything. I said, am I coming to be a squad player, play for the 21s, and he went, no. He said, I see you coming in straight in as a position, They were playing Aranio there and Gary Rowett there at the time. And he said, I want to play Aranio in midfield and I want to play Gary behind you as a centre-back. And you had to take that at face value. I didn't know Jim at the time, although he had a good reputation in the game. But he stuck to his word and give me the opportunity, after being in the building a week. So, and sort of never really looked back from that. So, can't thank him enough for that opportunity.
What are your memories of Jim?
He was, a lot of people call him a father figure, which he was. I don't know, he was really tough on us, but he kind of got you into the mentality that there was a reason, and he'd just give you a look sometimes, and you knew you pleased him or done well. You didn't have to speak. He spoke to you like a man. I was 21 at the time, but I think the other side, where there was periods where he'd let his hair down, he'd bring us into that. So he was well known for liking a drink and that, but he'd take us away, he'd take us abroad on trips pre-season, during the season. The odd time when, if one or two results hadn't gone well, he'd take us to the Belfry, pretty local, have a game of golf, have a drink, and we would all sit and have a drink together, and he'd chat about things, and he'd just drop a little nugget of something in, and just say, look, and you sort of knew you needed to give him a little bit more or do a bit more, or he had a way about him that you were desperate to do well for him, and I think that's the key to success. If you ever had an issue, you could go and, managers say my door's always open, but it's not. Whereas his was, you had to prepare for the smell of cigars, but that was the only tough part of going in his office to see him. But a great character and sorely missed.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So your debut was at Everton, so that's not a bad place to play your first game for Derby.
Yeah, it was Everton, and my manager Mervyn Day was in the meantime had joined and gone to Everton as a coach. So it was pretty nerve-wracking, I've got to say, knowing I was starting. But we managed to play really well that game and score 2 really good goals. It was obviously sending off. That was. I've got a good photo at home. Duncan Ferguson looks like he's just about to lamp me after he elbowed Big Choppy. So it was. I had a little bit of everything, but to go to a big club like Everton that were huge when I was growing up, they were the team for a period in the 80s, and beat them at Goodison was unbelievable.
A really interesting mix of players as well at Derby at that time.
Yeah, it was really. I'd only played with a couple of foreign players at Carlisle. We had a big French lad, Stefan Bonavacci, who had come in and was a level above, and I would say a little bit like Igor, like really commanding, had an aura about him. Obviously Igor was doing it at a high level, but similar characters, very aloof, but give you really good pieces of advice. I had Derek Mountfield at Carlisle, who was in that Everton team I just spoke about, who was brilliant for me in that period. But then to come to Derby with Chrissy Powell was brilliant. Lee Carsley sort of took me under his wing. He'd get me around on a Friday before a game to make sure I was eating properly. He'd cook me a bolognese or something. Dean Sturridge, and then Jakob, Gary Rowett, Christian Daly, who was still felt old to me, but they're only a couple of years older than me, if you know what I mean. But they'd been there and done it for a lot longer than I had. But you could just tell that I know these lads had come from all over the world, but the man who put them there, Jim Smith, made sure it was a group. It wasn't 3 or 4 different groups, the foreigners, the English, the Irish, they all came together, all got on, all socialised together, and I think again that's a key to managing and being successful.
You got telling off from Stefano Arano, didn't you, once with your antics in your famous car?
Yeah. Well, I was a rally fan growing up. My uncle was a navigator, and when I used to go back to Ireland, there's the four brothers, my dad and his three brothers, and we'd go out for lunch somewhere, and they'd race back and stuff, legally, I should say. But I used to go and watch the rallies. Colin McRae was one of my heroes. And when I'd signed for Derby, they used to get the Celikas, which was, going from my car I had at Carlisle, was like luxury, and I'd always promised myself on 50 appearances in the Premier League that I'd treat myself to a car. And there's a Subaru garage in Carlisle that I knew the owner, and I'd always said to him, and I'd tell him, one day I'm gonna get one off you, and luckily I was able to, and I was sort of in the car park one day after it had been snowing, doing a few donuts. Stefano got out of his car, just walked past, and he had a look like, I just thought, I'm really sorry. He didn't have to say anything to me, but the look just said everything needed to know. But it was that was good memories.
Yeah, enjoying the moment. I was thinking of the games, and there were so many different sorts of games for Derby, because at times, as we got to sort of around the end of the 20th century, moving into the 21st century, Derby started to have the wobbles, and maybe you could see what was coming. I just think of one game at Easter, a 4-4 draw at Bradford. It was a bit of a mixed day for you, shall we say?
Didn't see much of it. No, it was. I think it scored within a minute.
24 seconds.
24. Mally Christie went down the left, cut it across, and had a tap in. And then the rest was a little bit of a blur. I can remember them having a free kick. I was in the wall. Robbie Blake, I think it was stood beside me in the wall, so I thought he was trying to block. Dean Windass has just flicked the ball over the wall, and I just grabbed hold of Robbie's shirt. He caught us by surprise, grabbed his shirt. He's actually volleyed the ball into the goal, and then the referees cancelled the goal, given a penalty, and sent me off. I don't know if you know the changing rooms at Bradford. You can't get out the changing room. You can't see the pitch, so I'm just sat in the dressing room, and I kept hearing these cheers, and I was right beside the Derby fans, because the changing rooms at that end. So I didn't know who'd scored or what. So there was a little fella at the door of the changing room, just kept poking his head in and saying, "Oh yeah, it's 2-1, it's 3-3." I think Craig Butler, didn't he miss the penalty?
Yeah, Craig Burley could have had a hat-trick.
Butler, we used to call him Butler. Craig Burley, sorry.
Butler?
We used to call him Butler. I don't know where that nickname came from.
Okay.
So he was Butler. But he missed a penalty for a hat-trick. And was that to win the game?
I think that would have made it 5-4.
Yeah, so unbelievable game.
Yeah. Eventually your Derby time comes to an end, as tends to happen, your commodities. But you didn't want to go when they said, we're selling you to Southampton. Is that right? No,
because we had a difficult season that year, but managed to stay up, and I wouldn't say comfortably. We had a real confidence within the group. The team had changed a lot, but there was a lot of young lads in the team at the time, and it almost felt from a player's point of view that it was going to be a team that would build and you could progress with. We had some really good young players in the team at the time. Seth, Mally Christie, Riggs, Boats, Jacko, all those type of guys coming through, and a little bit of experience which you need. Craig Burley again, Brian O'Neill. Real good characters. No, I think the club was in a little bit of we didn't realise how much of a muddle the club was in terms financially, and it was out of the blue. I just got back off holiday and had a phone call from my agent saying the club had accepted a bid from Southampton, and I'll be honest, I didn't want to go, and I said, right, well, I'll go in. I rang Jim up. I said, look, can I come and see you? And he says, yeah, I'll be in the morning. Come in. I went into his office and said, look, I don't want to go. And he was like, look, it's up to you, but there's going to be a lot going. And he said, I won't. He says, I don't think I'll see the season out with the way things are going. He said, we're going to have to sell Seth, we're going to have to sell Malcolm, we're going to have to sell Chris at minimum, possibly more. And he kind of said, look, you've done brilliant for the club, and they're going to get some money out the back of it that's much needed. So I went to speak to Southampton, and Stuart Gray was the manager. Mick Wadsworth, who was my manager at Carlisle, again was his assistant at the time, and I knew a couple of the lads down there. I knew it was a good club, and they just moved to the new stadium. So I made the decision then to go to Southampton.
You spent quite a few years down there, didn't you?
Yeah, I was there. I saw my contract out, so I was there 5 years. It was, again, great time, apart from the last probably 15 months. Again, the club had put themselves in a position where they sacked a really good manager in Gordon Strachan for no reason. Again, I think people above were trying to do something out the box, and we ended up again. We had a couple of good managers. I think we had 5 or 6 managers in the next year, which is always going to go one way.
Always an indication.
It did. We got relegated. Again, I was happy to stay, but there was, I think it was 4 or 5 of us didn't have relegation clauses in the contract, and rather than come and speak to us and see if something could be done, we were kind of threatened that we wouldn't play for the club again if we didn't cancel our contract. So I thought, after all I've done over the last 4 years for the club, and I thought that was unfair. If they'd come and said, look, would you be willing to negotiate something and drop the wages, I would have done, because I really enjoyed living down there, and it's a really, really good club. But unfortunately, they went around it in a way that kind of made it impossible for me to stay, and ended up going to Sunderland.
Yeah, up to the northeast. That was an interesting time for you, wasn't it? Put it mildly.
Yeah, well, again, so you go back to the honesty of Jim Smith. Mick McCarthy was the manager at the time, and I knew Mick from Ireland, loved Mick, still do. And the only question I asked the owner was if because the club was in a real bad, they had 5 points, and this was the day before deadline at the end of January. They were on 5 points, so I knew they were going down. They'd sold it. The contract I was going to was on a championship contract, so that they were planning for the championship. I signed it was 18 months deal, so it wasn't in terms of a financial one for me. But it was the only reason I went to Sunderland. Well, 2 reasons. It's a massive club, but Mick McCarthy first and foremost. So I'd asked the chairman, if we lose every game from now to the end of the season, what's Mick's situation? And he said he'll be here no matter what. I was injured at the time. It was a small Achilles injury that I was nearly back training. Got back in about 10 days. They played 2 games in the meantime, lost both. Came back, came on in a game which we drew at Birmingham, lost the next game, and then Mick was sacked. So 4 games in, he was gone, and I thought, here we go. But Kevin Ball took over till the end of the season, finished the season off. Didn't do great. Ended up on 15 points, I think. And then Niall Quinn took over in the summer, put no manager in place, so he took it on, and he'd pull me in and said, look, we're delighted to have you here, we want you to sign a new contract. So I was like, oh, yeah, that's fine. And I was renting at the time, I'd held off buying, so he'd said, look, well, we're going to add 2 years, so they've had a 3-year contract. So we ended up buying a house. After 8 weeks of the season, he put Roy Keane in charge, which I thought would be great, because I got on well with Roy. And after we actually played Derby here, beat them.
Was that his first game in charge?
That was his second game, so we won the first, played both games. Didn't have a great game here, but we won 2-1. And then I wasn't even in the squad for the next game. Went up to see him and he was like, look, I just don't see you playing for me in the future. And I was fine, it's someone's opinion. I was like, oh shit. And he was like, oh no, you're like, and I said, no. I said, like, we've been in the house 2 weeks. Then he was like, all right, well, really sorry, but and so it was a tough period, which ended up in having a chat with Tony Pulis and going to Stoke. So,
but then the woes didn't stop there, if I remember rightly.
No,
because you go to Stoke, which eventually becomes a great move for you.
Yeah.
But they allow you to play, or Sunderland allow you to play against them, and you end up with an injury.
So it was before the loan window was introduced. So it was October. So I went on loan in October, and then I was going to sign a permanent. It was only a handshake, a gentleman's agreement. I'll sign a permanent in January once the window opens. So we played Leeds away the first game, won 4-0, and then we had Sunderland at home on Tuesday. Pulis had said, do you think they'd let you play? And I said, I guarantee they'll let you play because Keane won't want a thing. So anyway, he rang him up, he says, yeah, brilliant, he's letting you play. And I think it was 18 minutes into the game, went in for a challenge and snapped my leg and thought, here we go. They'd taken my contract on, so I only had 8 months left on my contract that was actually signed. To be fair, Roy and Sunderland rang me up and said, look, we'll bring you back and get you fit, see your contract out and make sure you sorted, which was really good of them. But now the owner, Peter Coates, Tony Scholes, the CEO, and Pulis came into the hospital and said they're going to honour the contract that they'd offered me in that January, which was 2.5 years. So that was great of them and sort of give me that extra incentive to get back and give them something back as well. So
yeah, it certainly did work. And that career at Stoke. What about international? What do you remember of your international days with Ireland?
Yeah, I loved it. I'd been called up for the B team when I was still at Carlisle. I'd really wanted to get in the senior team when I was at Carlisle because not many do. But I'd been called up, played in the B team, and then I think it was only within a week or two of being at Derby, I got the call up for the senior team against the Czech Republic. The same game, Damien Duff, Robbie Keane made their debuts. Kevin Kilbane made his debut in that game. So, a brilliant, great bunch of lads. There was sort of in the changeover, it was like Andy Townsend, Ray Houghton, Tony Cascarino was still in the squad at that time. Niall Quinn, Steve Staunton, the real heroes of mine, and just to be in the same squad as them. And then sort of that summer they retired, and it sort of became the younger group. Lee Carsley was in that, which was great. That got on really well with Lee. But I never really broke into the team. I was playing wing back for Derby. Mick played 4-4-2. I had Gary Kelly at right back to compete for the right back slot. I had Jason McAteer playing for Liverpool, right wing at that time. So kind of knew I wasn't going to get in front of them for a period. And then never really. I think injuries, and it wasn't big injuries, there were little injuries hit me at times when there was a changing of the guard, as you call it. I missed the trip to America, which was huge. Gary Kelly had retired, so there was a space there, but Steve Finnan took that. Damien Duff ended up playing on the right hand side. Obviously had a great career for Ireland when they started inverting wingers. But yeah, never even got a chance to do it. And then when Brian Kerr took over in 2002, 2003, first call up for him was the day Liam was born. So I was in hospital there. I rang him, asked him to report a day late, which he was fine with. It was a friendly up in Scotland. Joined the squad on the Sunday, which my missus was really pleased with. But on the Monday, she had to go back into hospital with a few issues. So I'd asked him to leave the squad. He was fine with me. I was in another squad, didn't play, and then it was the third squad called up. My dad had had a heart attack. So I just asked him, look, I said, look, will I play? Do you need me? And he was like, look, you won't play. You might be on the bench. So I said, look, again, it was a friendly, so, you know, again, every game's important, but I just said, look, I'm not in the right headspace. I'm going up to Carlisle to see my dad, and it's not life-threatening, but it's come as a huge shock. He was fine with it, but then my uncle rang me a couple of days later, and he'd done an interview, and the press had said, oh, like, where's Rory? And I don't know if he was trying to protect me, but he said, I don't know, not heard anything from him, which I wasn't too pleased with. Spoke to him, had a bit of an argument, and that was the end of my Ireland career, unfortunately.
So you go into coaching, and there's been coaching at Derby and coaching at Stoke and with Israel as well with Robbie Keane. What about now? Is your focus now on your two boys? Is that where the...
Yeah. So I'd done 5 years at Derby in the academy, 5 years at Stoke with the first team. Then I got the opportunity to go to Israel with Robbie, did a season out there, and then when we left there at the end of the 23-24 season, so I had 3 or 4 months where I was just looking for a job, and I wouldn't say I was getting stressed about it, but you know, there wasn't a day went past really that I wasn't ringing somebody up about something, and we ended up getting the offer to go to Ferencváros in Hungary in January last year. So went over, you know, a great experience again in a different country, and then with a few things that were going on with the boys, you know, Liam's moving, things going on in the summer, Finn obviously getting a little bit of a taste and having a big season. I just thought, I've been pretty selfish all my life, Colin, and you have to be as a footballer and a football person, because as you know, it's not social hours. You know, you're working every weekend, and even when you're not working, you're working, especially as a coach. So I just thought, you know, it's time. Been away from the family for nearly 2 years, so I thought I'll just take a bit of a chill out. I'd never, since I started at 15, as I say, I'd never had a period out where I wasn't either waiting for a job or looking for a job. So yeah, I've done it, and it's been a bit of a mix because the boys have had their injuries and things, but I've really enjoyed, you know, getting to the games and watching them, sort of, and been relaxed, and I still keeping in football and speaking to people in football, but more relaxed way than I was in a Derby. Did a Q&A for the coaches in the academy a couple of weeks ago now, and went in to see Eustace, who you know, I played with at Stoke, and it was great. It's great just to go and see these people and just, you know, spend 20 minutes, half an hour, and see how they're doing, what they do, which way they do things, you know, in terms of meetings. You know, I hated meetings as a player, so as a coach I thought, I can't be the one that spends hours in a meeting room. So that's my first question. I watch your meetings, and you know, Eustace, similar to myself, that, you know, he tries to keep the meetings as short as possible to maintain the attention span of players, because I know for a fact after 3 or 4 minutes of me jibber jabbering, probably like this one, people have turned off, mate. So, yeah, just getting little nuggets for whatever comes next.
Rory, thanks for joining us. Coming up on episode 14, former goalkeeper Lee Camp. Now, if you've missed any of our conversations so far, the likes of Phil G, Eric Steele, Craig Bryson, Paul Simpson, or Phil Brown, they're available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Rams Trust and 7 Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby for supporting us. Located on Derby's Pride Park, 7 is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails. With a focus on quality, seasonal ingredients and a welcoming atmosphere, 7 is where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams is a Backpass production.